what somebody's going to have to do at some point. Cool story, and it's kind of on the down low for right now, but we got invited by the Office of the Inspector General they want to do an overhaul of the statute and redo it. So the permanent list, the 15-year list, the 10-year list, the 7-year list, they want to do an overhaul of it and decide what's
good. That's awesome. I'm glad you guys are invited to help out with that.
and I
Are we
invited.
recording now?
Yep.
Well, not gonna talk about it then. But anyways.
Everyone, thanks for signing on. We still have about 5 minutes until we get started, and usually we take a couple of minutes to let our latecomers sign on. So hang tight, and we will check in a little bit and get started. Thanks. Thanks for signing on. We're gonna hang tight just for a couple of minutes. Some of our peers, we know have busy schedules, so we wanna give them an option to sign on a little bit late. So just hang tight for about 2 minutes and then we'll get started. We'll do introductions and we'll move on to the presentation.
And who's the 218?
All right, everyone. Thanks for signing on to our peer support echo. We're gonna go ahead and get started. So everybody is muted upon entering automatically. So if you want to jump in and ask a question, just make sure you unmute yourself. Just a reminder, this is recorded. We don't post them publicly, but we do record them. So the event that somebody wants this information, if you want a recording of this, you can email me and we can send that out to you. But just a heads up, it is recorded. So for now, we're just going to start with introductions. And if this is your first time signing on to the Peer Support Echo, let us know because we have a bunch of regulars. Some peers do sign on late. Again, we want everybody to just be present when you can. If you have to sign off early, that's fine. Just in order to get the full CE credit for 1 hour, you do need to be signed on for an hour. So we're going to start with introductions. Let's start with Sherry. Sherry is in the room with us. You don't have to unmute yourself because the mic will pick you up here.
Oh, okay.
You can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Sherry. I work with Wayside.
Jody, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself? If you don't have a mic, that's okay. You can always chat into the box as well. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation. So if you have questions and you don't have access to a mic, feel free to do that and I will check back in with you. Jody Bergman is a recovery navigator with Wayside Recovery Center with us. Let's jump to Laura M. If you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself, let us know who you are and where you're from. Laura, I see that you're muted, but we're not able to hear you. Laura, if you want to go ahead and chat into the box and introduce yourself, we can do it that way. Ben W., if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Ben Willey from Thief River Falls, Minnesota. I'm a peer support specialist with community-based services as well as an arts facility called Northern Lights.
Awesome. Glad you could be here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Cynthia Townley, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself. I'm just going to step off to the side and turn her volume up, but go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, hi, my name is Cynthia. I am a recovery coach with Project Clean Start out of Grand Rapids, Minnesota.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cynthia. Alyssa, do you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I am a project coordinator at Minnesota Recovery Connection.
Awesome. Katie, sometimes you do or do not have access to unmute yourself. Are you able to? Here we go. All right, Katie just shot in. Katie is a peer recovery specialist with Wayside at our women's location. Andrea S., can you unmute yourself and introduce, please?
Hi, I'm Andrea. Can you hear me? I have no idea.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm a recovery coach at Wayside Family. I'm also here with Ryan. Is it Tebow? Yeah. Ryan Tebow. She started today. Also at Wayside Family here. She's going to be at both locations. But yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Awesome. I'm glad you could both be here. Ryan, if you could just send me an email, then I can follow up with you afterwards.
Okay, my email's not quite yet set up because the technology guy was out, but as soon as I can, I will.
No worries.
Okay.
Libby Fairchild, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself. Libby, I've unmuted you if you want to introduce yourself. Okay, Libby, feel free to chat in the box. Tiffany M, if you want to unmute and introduce yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I'm Tiffany Morgan. I'm the new Family Service Peer Support Specialist for Wayside.
Awesome, I'm glad you could be here, Tiffany, welcome. And then last but not least, we have somebody calling in at a 218 number. If you could unmute and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, this is Amy Conant, and I'm a peer support specialist, mental health and recovery, and I'm with Wellness in the Woods.
Awesome, Amy. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, Tiffany, you just signed on. Tiffany Urban, do you want to unmute and introduce yourself? I don't know if Tiffany has access to her mic. Tiffany Irvin is the Recovery Services Manager at Minnesota Recovery Connection. So we're glad you could be here, Tiffany. I did your introduction for you. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Today we're super lucky. We have Gina Evans from Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, and she's going to be doing a presentation about DHS background checks. I know we always have questions about this as peers. Her presentation is gonna take about 45 minutes. I did email out the presentation and the associated paperwork. If you didn't get that, you can email me afterwards. Feel free to jump in with questions. Remember to unmute yourself. You also can chat in the box and I will pause Gina and let her know if you have a question. Today we've extended this echo until 1:30 so that if people do have additional questions, we make time for that. We also want to make sure we have time for announcements from your organizations or the community. And then again, just keep in mind, again, to get that full CE credit, you do need to be signed on for an hour because that is what we were certified for. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Gina. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gina Evans, and I am, well, I do a lot of things, but my day job is Community Outreach Director for Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. Me and myself and my team are out in the community working with impacted individuals in the jails and detoxes. We also work with professionals in the community. I serve as the past president for the Second Chance Coalition on the governance team for the Minnesota Justice Research Center. I won't bore you with all the stuff that I do, but I'm super active in the community, helping people coming behind me. My background is in criminal justice because I came out of the criminal justice system. I have 13 felony convictions and been to prison 3 different times and in most of the county jails, and lost custody of my kids. I have 3 beautiful babies and 2 stepkids and a husband who's been through the system, and started shooting meth when I was 15. And so I don't know this information because I learned it in a book. I know this information because I worked through it over the years, and now I'm working through it at the legislature. And so I want to start off with saying I'm not an attorney. I'm not here to give you legal advice. I'm not here to tell you that this is how you need to do it and there's no other way to do it. I'm here to tell you that this is how I did it, and this is what I've learned helping other people do it. You always want to see an attorney if you have access to one. The Legal Rights Center is one place that you can do that. and you can always get a private attorney to help. There's lots of options out there, and so I'm always going to recommend that you meet with somebody that has gone through and gotten a law degree. There's lots of them out there that will do it for free, but I know that when I went through the application process at Teen Challenge and had them give me the letter from the DHS that once again verified the fact that I suck and I'm always going to suck, that it was really heartbreaking. And so I just want to help people that get that. We got some information from DHS that said that only 30% of people even follow through with the appeal. It broke my heart. Because I think that's just for those of us that are in recovery and coming out of the criminal justice system, that just is another foot on the back of our neck. And that when we can stand together and be strong and help one another, lots of people win their appeals. And so we can do that together. And that's why I'm here today, just to help you through that process. You can win, you can get a yes. You just have to do it well, and that's what this presentation is about, is us helping you be able to do that the best that you can, and that's what this information is about. So there we go. So thanks. So what a background study is an investigation into your past criminal, and I just want to, it's your past. And so for a lot of us, we've drawn a line in the sand and we're past that part of our lives. And so it's just explaining to DHS why you're not that person anymore. So please focus on that. This study is done through multiple agencies, including the BCA, the CPS, the FBI. And that's the thing about it. It isn't just your criminal history, it's other parts of the system. And so that's why it's so important that you go get, or they're going to send you the study that they've actually gotten from DHS. It's not just your BCA report. It's from the feds, it's from DHS and Child Protective Services. So it's called a NET study, which is different than it was 5 years ago even. It's NET study 2.0, and your fingerprints are included. The study is then compared to the Minnesota statute, which is the 245C15, to determine your eligibility for employment. This is different than it was just even 3 years ago, and it's harder now than it was then.
Gina, can you tell us what BCA stands for?
Bureau of Criminal Investigation.
Okay.
Bureau of Criminal
Apprehension. Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry. Stop me if.
Yeah, no
Lots
problem.
of acronyms. Yep. Lots of acronyms. So agencies that use this study is anybody that's licensed by the DHS. I think there's a thought out there, a myth out there that it's just people that work with vulnerable adults or children. And unfortunately for us, for peers, that is the case, but it doesn't just affect us as peers or people in mental health or people in chemical dependency. Unfortunately, it affects people that do hair braiding. It affects people that are barbers. It affects people that want to sell real estate. It affects anybody that has a license with the Department of Health and Human Services. If you want to be a contractor, if you want to be, it affects so many people. I think Randy Anderson was telling me that like there's 18 licensing agencies that work through the Department of Human Services that need verification through this statute. And so, and the unfortunate thing is sometimes people go to school for months and months and months and then find out that their crime is in the statute and that they spent all that money on school and can't have a license. It's unfortunate. The good news is the Office of the Inspector General is going to do a deep dive on the statute here in the next legislative session and maybe make some changes so we can be sending up good thoughts and mojo about that process. So anybody that's licensed through the Department of Health, the Department of Corrections, anybody that does personal care and all of that stuff. So I'm going to click on this and you guys have access to that through, so this is a lot of information and it's kind of old information, but not much of it has changed.
Let me make sure we're sharing this right screen here. 1 second, guys. I'm going to pull up that screen for you. Let's see.
And we don't need to do that. It's in the PowerPoint and I made sure those links were live. on the PowerPoint. We don't have to go through that. I just wanted to show everybody like kind
Sure.
of the breadth and depth of it. It's a lot more than just us. So that's why I said it can be 45 minutes, it can be an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay, we can go back to the other one.
yeah, we don't need to do that.
Okay. All right, 1 second here. Yep. That's not what they're seeing. Hold on 1 second. Still seeing the background checks. All right, there we go. Where were we here?
Right. One more.
There we go.
Yep. So at this link at the bottom of this page though goes to another a link on the internet that shows all of the other agencies and licensing that it doesn't have anything to do with us as peers, but just so you guys know, and if you're ever helping anyone else with this stuff, that the breadth and depth of it is pretty wide. So here's the occupations and some of the other stuff that, I mean, anytime you're in someone's home or dealing with money or mortgages or it's pretty brutal, and it makes getting your life back together really difficult. And I feel like anytime we can let legislators or people know. So there's the statute, the 245 C15 statute. And that's, one of the things when you're really trying to work through this DHS set aside stuff, understanding and knowing what your charges are and what in the 609 statute. So when you commit a crime, it's under the 609 statutes. I think a lot of those are I always get way too far into this. So the 245 C15 statute are the disqualifying crimes. I'm going to stick to the peer recovery support. The 245 C15 statute is disqualifying crimes or conduct. So when you are trying to be a peer recovery support specialist and you have criminal convictions, you can go down wanting to be a peer recovery support specialist. You can go down and get a copy of to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which is in St. Paul on Maryland Avenue, and get a copy of your criminal convictions. And then look at that and compare it to the disqualifying crimes or conduct and find out if you even qualify before you go to the Minnesota Recovery Connection and take the classes to find out if you have a crime that's a disqualification before you go to school to be a drug counselor or mental health, and find out about if you have a crime that's a disqualification, because there's a list of crimes that are a permanent disqualification.
Do you have what example or some examples of those?
Yeah, so it's murder.
Okay.
It's attempted murder. It's child pornography. It's a lot of the crimes that are on there are crimes that you, kind of would expect to be on there. But then there's some other things that we at the Second Chance Coalition are fighting against. It's assault with a deadly weapon. You got into a bar fight and hit somebody with a glass. I have a friend that hit her. It was really a domestic that hit her dad with a baseball bat in the leg and didn't even leave a mark. And they charged her with second-degree assault with a deadly weapon. It's on the permanent list. Anybody that has that's in Minnesota, there's no differentiation between predatory offense and a sexual offense. It's all predatory. That's on failure to register is on the permanent list. And so, and those are permanent disqualifications. You'll never be able to be a peer recovery support specialist and be able to bill for it, be able to get licensed and certified. And so anything else that's on any of the other crimes that aren't on that permanent list, the 15-year disqualification, the 10-year disqualification, the 7-year disqualification, any of the crimes that are listed on either of those three things, there's what's called a set aside. And even if it hasn't been 15, 10, or 7 years, you can fill out what's called an appeal, and the commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services can grant you what's called a set aside. And you just have to prove to them that you no longer pose a risk of harm, and they can grant you a set aside and allow you to work with vulnerable adults and children and give you a set aside. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is how to put together a good appeal for a set aside, to be able to do the thing that you feel called to do in your recovery and all of that. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the actual appeal. So the process for these appeals is, you fill out the application for a job, and, a lot of times you are already in, they've hired you, you fill out the application, you get fingerprinted. A lot of times people are already working in the job, and then they find out that, their application, they've been denied. And there's a couple of different things that can happen when they get denied. They can either, they're removed from their job, and they can't work there until the application gets, the appeal gets approved or denied. They can work, but they have to be supervised, or no supervision is needed. And so there's a lot to be said about what they send a letter to your to your place of employment, and there's a lot to be said about which letter that you receive. So if you need to be removed, that's that means that whatever the charge is a little bit more serious. If you need supervision, usually the ones that come in that a person doesn't need supervision, it's a little less serious. But I've seen, we have lots of employees at Teen Challenge, and I've seen it go all the ways with all of those things. So, and then there's not a lot of rhyme or reason either with whether you get 15 days to file the appeal or 30 days to file the appeal. And so that's why having all of this information ahead of time is so important, because knowing what you're working with and getting a lot of this information ahead of time is so important, because no matter what, you're going to need all of your police reports. You're going to need character letters, and you're going to need a lot of this information. And regardless, you're only going to have 15 or 30 days to do it. And so I have 13 felony convictions and 3 gross misdemeanor convictions, and they're in like 7 different counties. And I had to go to all of those places and get all of my police reports. And it was a ton of work. And I had 30 days to do it. I had a full-time job, and I had 3 teenage boys at home.
Does it cost money to get your reports?
Some of the places I had to pay per copy. Most places were good about it. But some of the places I had to pay a little bit of money for it. Some of them were digital. Some of them, it was long enough ago that they were like, we don't have copies. We don't. So they had to write a letter and say, like, that's past the amount of time that we're required to hold stuff. And that's all I was able to turn in, was just a letter that said that,
right.
That they didn't have files that far back. And so, I mean, every county is different, every time frame is different, but you have to do the work to be able to turn it in. So, what we're going to go over today is the appeal process itself. I have a copy of the application in the paperwork for people to look at, so they know what they're working with. But for some people that have longer criminal history, or even the police reports themselves are longer, it can be a lot of work, and the sooner you get started, the less overwhelming it can be. So
let's take a moment to pause here. Does anybody have any questions about the information that Gina has brought up so far? You can either chat, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll keep circling back for questions. But does anybody have questions right now they want to jump in with? Katie, you have a question. I know you don't have access to your mic, so go ahead and chat on in. What's your question? Katie, feel free to chat in your question. We're going to keep going unless anybody else has a question. Okay, again, feel free to chat. Katie, as soon as you enter your question, I'll pause Gina and we'll, oh wait, here we go. Katie wants to know, is it true that I say I switch jobs? Will I have to do a set aside for every background study?
The answer now is no.
Hey.
So we worked on this legislation last year, Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, March, and Second Chance Coalition, and got the legislation changed.
Awesome.
And so now there is, and I'm not sure if it went into effect January 1st or if it'll go into effect in July. I always get caught up in that. But they have now what's called a traveling set aside. So once you have a set aside, as long as, and DHS is working on this currently, as long as nothing has changed, the set aside will travel with you to your next job. So
good question. Thanks for jumping in with that, Katie.
Requests for reconsideration which is what it's called. So you apply for a job. There's things in your background that go against what the 245C15 statute says. You get denied for employment, and then you have this appeal process, which is called a request for reconsideration. There's two reasons that you can ask for a request for reconsideration. The first reason is that the information that they have on file is inaccurate. That's usually not us. That would be your brother used your name. That would be someone else used your name. That would be that they charged you with a crime that you actually didn't commit. That would be, I mean, there's lots of examples, but that's usually not us in our addiction as peers. Usually it's that we went through treatment, we got better, we have years of recovery, we're not that person anymore. And so usually for us, the reason we're asking for a request for reconsideration is that we no longer pose a risk of harm. And so then it's our job to show the commissioner of the Department of Human Services why we no longer pose a risk of harm. And that onus falls on us. That's the point of asking for reconsideration, is that we're going to put together this case that we're telling them that we're better now and that we no longer pose a risk of harm. And that's what we're going to talk about, is the application for reconsideration. So I don't know how to do this now.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull that up for you. 1 second, guys. We're going to pull this up.
Can you put it on a double screen so I have the...
I don't think I can for them to see that.
Okay.
But we can scroll
No,
through
I can
this.
look at this one and then have that one.
Perfect. So yeah, you can scroll here right there.
Yep. And so some of the items that you're going to need are going to be, and I don't know if you guys at home can do a double screen and have the items that you may need on there, and then the application itself, but I'm going to reference both of them. So when you get your letter from the DHS saying that you've been disqualified, they're going to actually send you a copy of your BCA report along with this letter that says, here are the police reports and the explanation, the crimes that we need explanations for. They're going to be very clear. Read through the letter a couple times. You can see I whited it out. It was my husband's actually. And so they're going to ask you for all this information, other names that you've had. You need to fill this out really super thoroughly. You need to read through it. You need to answer all the questions that they're asking. If they ask you for a police report, don't just not send it in because it's a lot of work, because they're just going to deny you again. And they're only going to take this application as seriously as you do. And it's a big deal. They're saying that based on your prior conduct that you pose a risk of harm to the community. And if you want them to take you seriously and give you the right to work with vulnerable adults and children, then you need to take it seriously. Treat it like a job application. Treat it like an award. Treat it like, I don't know, something that's really super important to you because you want them to treat it like that. And so you fill out the application just like a job application. And this is going to be about your the place that you want to work, it asks about the job study information. I mean, it's kind of like a job application. And then they're going to ask you questions about like the place that you want to work at, the tasks that you're going to be doing. I mean, this is basically about them wanting to understand that you understand what your job is going to be. And so the cool thing, when I did it, they didn't have this stuff. It was almost like a trick. They wanted you to understand that you understood. But now on the job applications, if you look at this at the bottom, it says documents you want to submit, your job description, employment evaluations, employer or provider recommendations. So they're giving you hints at the bottom of it about supplemental documentation that you want to provide with it. So they didn't do that when I had to turn this in. So they're really trying to help you do well with these. So these little black boxes at the bottom of the document is supplemental information you're going to want to turn in with it. So, get your job description. If you've had a 30, 60, 90 at your job and the time it took to get the DHS disqualification back, any of that stuff that you can get from your boss because they want to keep you, provide that along with it. And then for people who have already gotten set aside and maybe just changed jobs, the girl that asked the question, this little box right here, I already submitted information about this offense and don't wish to add additional details. There's a box right there. And then do you believe you were correctly disqualified by DHS? Yes. So that means you're not arguing about the correctness of it, but you're arguing that you no longer pose a risk of harm, right? And so to be reading through it and understanding that it's not A, correctness, that it's B, you no longer pose a risk of harm. And that's going to happen all the way through these applications. We're not arguing A, correctness, we're arguing B, risk of harm. And so it's going to ask you that for every offense. And so it's a little complicated, but you'll have all of this information to go back to and be able to reference. And then for this particular offense, explain in your own words, including details about what happened and why. And I'm going to beat this dead horse over and over throughout this presentation. Please, please, please take accountability for what happened. I have helped many, many people, and see the bottom of this that says, please submit the police report. The police are going to talk about what happened. They're going to talk about the whys and the whats, and we were at the stop sign, and here's what happened. This right here is an opportunity for you to A, take accountability for your part in what happened during this offense, and to B, talk about really, this is just them giving you an opportunity to take accountability. I can't tell you how many times I've walked somebody through this and they said, so-and-so called the cops on me and the girl did this and the boy did that. And if this thing wouldn't have happened, this thing wouldn't have happened. And this is just really your opportunity to say, I'm not this person anymore. If I wouldn't have been doing drugs, this thing wouldn't have happened. And I'm not this person anymore. And my heart is broken that this happened. And this is your opportunity to take accountability for the crime that happened and take accountability and take accountability and take accountability. I can't explain that anymore. They're going to read the police report and see what happened. And so I don't know that by details, they mean details. And so I've only had 2 people in the 25 that I've walked through this that didn't get approved for a set aside. And both times it was because they asked too soon. And so that's what I can say about explaining the offense. Yeah. So take accountability. So does anybody have questions?
Yeah, we can pause. Anybody have questions they want to chat in or unmute? Again, I did send you all this paperwork this morning. If you didn't get that, just let me know and I can resend that out. But yeah, does anybody have any questions? Okay, Jody just chatted in. Where did you say the list was? How do I know what would disqualify me from being a peer support specialist? Is it different than what would disqualify me if I went to school to become an LADC? Right now, I'm a navigator, recovering navigator through AmeriCorps, and I was able to pass their background check. So would I be good for all of them?
That's a great question. So I'm gonna do this. Can they see whatever's up here?
Yep, right now we are looking at this report, this application.
Okay, so I can open another tab and they'll see what I open?
Yep, go ahead. Yep. Do
Okay,
you want to type something in here? Let me
Yep.
pull this over for you.
so I'm gonna pull it up. It's statute and so it's yucky. And this is in, if you, this is in the paperwork that you guys received. It's called the 245C15. And it's one of the links in the PowerPoint that we were just looking at. And so these are the disqualifying crimes. And these are the only ones that there are. And so if you passed to be a navigator, chances are you're going to pass for a peer specialist, you're going to pass for an LADC. There's only a few things that, and they're things that you would expect it to be. They're going to be more heinous crimes. They're going to be crimes of violence. There's a couple of things on here that are tough for me to swallow. All the rest of them are 15-year, 10-year, and 7-year disqualifications. And in all of those, the commissioner of the Department of Human Services can grant a set aside, which is what we're talking about today. There's a shorter list of permanent disqualifications. And if you've already been granted a set aside as a navigator, you probably, and I'm not a lawyer, but you probably are eligible for a set aside as a peer. So
does that make sense, Jody? I know you can only chat, but does that answer your question? At least the link to, okay, yes, great. Katie, I know you haven't gotten there yet, but towards the end, I'd ask questions about how the people at your workplace are different and alike to the victims in your crime.
Yeah.
If it's possible, it will actually help your job experience.
Yes, I will cover that.
Yep, cool. We'll get to that, Katie. Thanks for bringing that up. Anybody else have questions? Jump in before we keep going.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said too soon. What do you mean by too soon?
Yep. So the couple, yep. So the couple people that I've helped personally with their set aside application apply. So they had been in jail for 6 months. They had been with Teen Challenge because the application process was taking so long. They had been employed with us for almost a year. And by the time they actually got sentenced in court, it had been like 9. So their sentencing for their crime was only like 6 months ago when they finally got to the point where their set aside application got looked at. So the sentencing had only been about 6 months ago. And so they denied them because the DHS set aside stuff looks at from your sentencing of your crime. And so, when the DHS looked at it, they just said that they really wouldn't look at it because of the severity level of the crime and the fact that not even a year had passed since the sentence. And so, does that make sense?
Andrea, you're muted, but does that make sense for your question? Andrew, if you have a follow-up question, feel free to chat it in or unmute, but you're still
Sorry,
muted.
yeah, we're good. I get it. If so 2 years ago is okay. Like if something was 2 years ago, that's should be all right.
Yep. So anything, I mean, and this, you guys have to just remember, this has just been in my experience, but we have 500 full-time staff at Teen Challenge. So I have a lot of experience. And so anything that I've seen that isn't a pretty serious crime against a person, that falls under the 15-year disqualification, that the sentencing has been over a year, it is usually pretty good to go. Like the two that they've denied because it hadn't been a long enough since the sentencing were less than a year. It had been less than a year since sentencing, and they denied it because not enough time had passed. So it had been less than 1 year.
Thanks for the question, Andrea. We're going to keep going, but we'll pause again for questions, and feel free to chat them in, guys.
So the other thing with this, where was I with the
Application.
Yep.
Yep. You were pointing out not that it's about the incorrect, but they were talking about,
Yeah.
yep. Part B.
So victims and intended victims of your offense. This is another thing where you have a really good opportunity to talk about your victims of your offense. And even when it's drug crimes, people want to say there were no victims of my offense. And the victims are your children. The victims are yourself. The victims are your parents. The victims are the neighborhood that you're in. Like, you need to really broaden your idea when it's drug crimes. If it's financial transaction card fraud, the victims are society. The victims are, like, really look at who, the victim, there's no such thing as a victimless crime. And so to really understand that, the people that are going to be looking at this, and how they see, and there's, these little bullet points down here with these exclamation points talk about that. They are looking at vulnerability and injury and all that stuff. If you stole from your work, to talk about how the person that did that in your addiction is not the person you are today, and that you would never do that again. Again, if your crimes were theft, if your crimes were, taking advantage of somebody else, all the more that you need to take the time. Don't write 1 or 2 sentences. If you're not going to take this seriously, either are they. And so with drug crimes and stuff, this gets, I feel like this is a little bit easier. And I did, part of the packet of information that Lucia sent you guys was my letter, and I get into pretty good detail about this. You guys are welcome to use any of that at any time. I'm a pretty open book. And so, but this is where you have an opportunity to sell yourself and to help anybody that you're helping with this sell themselves as well. But this is your opportunity to sell it. So, and this is the other part for rehabilitation. Get restitution receipts, get your court-ordered discharge from probation, get your treatment rehab, discharge from mental health, diplomas, certificates, your peer recovery support certificate. All the DHS has is your criminal history, your treatment, your discharges from mental health stays, emergency rooms. Like, they have all of your negative history going against you. And this kind of stuff is your opportunity to build your case in a positive way. All the things you've done well, any thank you cards, any stuff that you've been involved in, any pictures of going to second chance events, any walk for recovery for MRC, any of the stuff that you're doing, your CEU certificate for being here today. Any of the stuff that you're doing well, get a 3-ring binder, get a file folder, start throwing all that stuff in there right now. Any event that you're at, that you're doing something, go volunteer at Feed My Starving Children or the Soup Kitchen or whatever. Start saving that stuff. You can start right now building a case to why you're a different person than the person that made those mistakes before. Even if you're not ready, you can start right now building a case for why that person that made those mistakes isn't who you are right now. Start saving that stuff. And even if the time hasn't passed or it's only been 2 months or 3 months or 4 months since sentencing, you can start going to collect those police reports. You can start going to collect all that stuff. So once that 30-day clock starts ticking, you have some of that stuff already done, and it's not such a stressful thing, because I think I still have a little PTSD from when that clock started ticking. I was like, 30 days. It felt like when I wanted to get married and they told me I only had 30 days to ask all them county attorneys permission to change my name. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So anyways, and be paying attention. I'm going to keep referring back to these little shaded boxes, because they're giving you hints about the things you need to turn in with each of those things. So and here's another opportunity for you to sell yourself. How has this treatment, training, counseling, rehabilitation helped you understand why you committed this offense? This is great. Like if you did any DBT or any kind of counseling where they talk to you about, in my childhood, I didn't learn, I thought that it was only wrong if I got caught. This is an opportunity for you to talk about why you as a peer recovery support specialist is the perfect person to be walking through addiction with people that are addicted. Like this is a perfect opportunity to sell yourself as, yes, you, other than anyone else, is the perfect person for that, to help this population. And then how will this treatment, counseling, or rehabilitation keep you from committing other similar offenses? And I know that for me, doing this work reminds me every day about why I can't and won't go back to the person that I used to be. And so what tools, skills, and support do you now have that will prevent you from committing a similar offense? That's all that same stuff. You're just selling yourself and helping them understand that why we are the perfect people to be working with our peers. They make it pretty easy now. And then how are the people who receive services at Teen Challenge kept safe so that you do not become a victim of, fifth degree possession? So, this is an opportunity for you guys to maybe share some of your skills as a peer recovery support person, to talk about ethics, to talk about the HIPAA rules and that are in place, and to help the DHS understand that you understand the safety that is put in place through peer recovery support, through Wayside, through, just a great opportunity for you to shine your skills in understanding. This is something that you could maybe touch base with Lucia about, or your supervisor about. Great opportunity for you to show that you understand the rules and regs that are in place around that. This is one of the specific crimes that the person that I got this from was charged with, but it's going to go through every crime. So this person, it was specifically drugs, but if this person was charged with theft or taking advantage of somebody or whatever, it's going to be specific to your specific crime. And so to be able to talk about each one of those individual crimes. And so for me, my paperwork like this was much longer than this, because I had like 8 or 9 different crimes that they wanted to know and talk about. So each person is gonna have a different length and a different number of crimes that they need to explain. But at the end of the day, they want to know, why do you no longer pose a risk of harm to the organization, to the victims, and to the people that you're going to be serving as a peer recovery support specialist, and then any other information. And in my letter, I go into very specific detail about why I not only no longer pose a risk of harm to the population that I'm going to be serving, but that I am an asset to those people for that very reason. And that I would ask that they reconsider my my set aside and allow me an opportunity. So
Cool. I'll pull back up the presentation.
Yep.
Okay,
And then
give me 1 second.
let people ask questions. I know that was a Fire
Yeah,
hose.
anybody feel free to jump in for questions. I'm gonna come here and pull back up our presentation here.
And really, you guys feel free to ask lots of questions. My personal life is full transparency. Both of my parents are sick right now, and I have a ton going on. And so I'm a little foggy and not my best presentation self today. So please ask questions if I'm not being clear.
You're doing awesome. It all makes sense more to me than definitely did before. And also, Gina's email is at the end of the presentation and I sent it out. So you can always follow up by email. You know, this is a lot of information. Sometimes we don't have the questions until later when we have the questions. So if you can't think of it right now, no problem. Feel free to send them in later. Cool. Let's keep going.
All right. So the other thing that I just oftentimes, and especially like I work with a lot of clients that are graduating from our long-term program, and they want to go into our aftercare program, and they're, you know, always wanting to know, what can I do now? And not only just with passing a DHS set aside, but they always want to know about expungements and pardons. In 2016, I actually went in front of the pardon board and received a full pardon for all 13 of my felony convictions and 3 gross misdemeanor convictions from the Attorney General and the governor. And the most difficult one was oh darn it, see, foggy brain, the Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Gilday. For all, and I mean, I've been told that nobody with my criminal history has been pardoned from that board because of the length of my criminal history. And so, and, you know, throughout all of that process, people ask me all the time, like, how did you do it? How did you do it? And, you know, the reality was that I was able to do that because I started building my case 10 years earlier. And how I did that was by going to meetings, going to counseling, completing a year-long treatment program, being involved in my church, hanging out with Randy Anderson, going to Second Chance Coalition, fighting the fight, volunteering, getting engaged in my community. And I started that file. I have a file right now about this thick of thank you cards and newspaper articles. And I saved everything. Every time somebody said thank you, every time I ended up in the paper, every time Randy Anderson did a selfie, like I saved all that stuff. And
that's a lot to save.
Yeah, well, I have my pardon application that I turned in was a 3-line binder about this thick, and it was, you know, thank you letters and just all the stuff that I had done, because my BCA report, my criminal history that came from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, was 37 pages long. Like I had dug a really, really deep hole for myself, and it took me 10 years to create the equivalent of that, so that when I went in front of the pardon board, that I had something equal to show them that, yes, I had made all these mistakes and that my life was a train wreck for 15 years, but that I also had spent 15 years of doing good work and going to school and getting trained and, you know, kind of making up for it, right? That, I guess it's not really karma, but, and we can all start doing that right now, like drawing that line in the sand and doing something different. And so for all of us, you know, starting that file of stuff that is different and getting our peer recovery support specialist training and going to CEUs and collecting that stuff and volunteering and getting engaged in community and whatever that means for people. You know, for me it's church, and for other people it's MRC and community and volunteering and AA and NA and whatever that means for people. And so
Katie has a quick question here, Gina. How long ago was the most recent felony of yours that they pardoned, and how long do you think that people should wait until they try that for that process?
Yep. So my last felony conviction was in November of 2002. I think that's right.
Mhm.
Yep. So that was my last felony conviction. Yep. And then
So
I-
how long do you recommend that other people wait until they
Well,
start
it's
trying
not
the
a
process?
recommendation thing. You have to wait 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, that's
Okay.
the law. So, well, it's 5 years for nonviolent crimes,
Okay,
but in Minnesota, drug crimes are considered crimes of violence.
okay.
So,
Mm.
so pretty much everything.
So 10 years.
Yep, so 10 years. So, and I think like check forgeries, financial crimes are considered nonviolent crimes,
Mm.
but who has a bunch of felony crimes and doesn't have a drug crime to go along with
Right.
it? And so for most people, and again, places like the Council on Crime and Justice, my friend Josh Esme, they do an expungement clinic one
Mhm.
Saturday a month, and you can go to their website, the Legal Justice Center.
Mhm.
It's in Minneapolis, and then the Minnesota Justice Research Center does some stuff with it, and like the Hamlin the Hamlin Center for Justice and Law has a new legal
Mhm.
clinic that they do. So if you want, I could, after Thanksgiving, that's what I'm telling everybody right now.
Yeah.
That I hope my life slows down after
Yeah.
Thanksgiving. I can get you the links. You
Cool.
can post them.
Yeah.
Because all of those agencies now are starting to do these legal clinics for free for
Right.
people, where they actually have people come in and they walk through it with them.
Right.
And so, and that's one of the things that the Minnesota Sentencing Guideline Commission, the Minnesota Justice Research Center, we're going to try this year to get drug crimes moved off of the crimes of violence list, which
Okay.
will change
Right.
all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But right now, you can't apply for expungement because it's a crime of violence except for fifth degrees at all. And you can't apply for pardons until 10 years for drug crimes because they're considered crimes of violence.
Okay, and
Just
Katie
one.
wants to know, so is that the same for misdemeanors? If you're charged as a misdemeanor
No.
in the end?
No, misdemeanors are different.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you know what that timeline is for misdemeanors?
I think it's 5. Josh Esme at
And that's
Legal
something
Rights
we could
Center.
probably Google, yeah,
Yep.
so, but
Yep.
I think it's 5.
I think it's 5.
Okay.
Is there 2 of these?
Maybe.
All right. We can do this though, huh?
Yep.
Yeah. So there's the website and the DHS frequently asked questions. It is the end. That's awesome. I did that in an hour. Woohoo. So I mean, the other thing is I'm always willing to meet with people after Thanksgiving to talk about this kind of stuff. Like, it's really a passion of mine. They make it really difficult. When I found out that DHS only gets about 30% of people that actually appeal the process, and I'll just tell you a little story about why I'm so passionate about it. Can we go to the statute?
Yeah. Cynthia, I see that you raised your hand while I pull up the statute. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah. So I know quite a few people who have charges that are in like stay of adjudication. What does the DHS say about those kind of things? Does that also cause them to raise concerns and possibly send you one of them forms or ask you to explain your crimes in those situations as well?
Yep. So stay of adjudications are really a tricky thing. I have a guy right now that I just hired that has a stay of adjudication. And because the DHS background checks don't just look at criminal convictions, they also look at civil stuff. And usually with stays of adjudication, like sometimes so what I'm about to tell you about is in that area. So they don't just look at convictions. They also look at arrests. They also look at civil stuff. And so that's why I talked about at the beginning, it's FBI, it's CPS, it's arrests. Like, they look at so much more than just the conviction. And so, yes, they are going to look at anything that's a stay of adjudication and ask you to get the arrest report, and it's not just convictions.
Okay, so with the timelines, I know that you mentioned that it takes sometimes it can take a while for them to get back to you.
Yep.
Now, in my case, they said that they needed more time to look into my background.
Tell me what supervised, unsupervised,
They
removed?
didn't say, they didn't say. I just got a letter from them stating that they needed more time to look into my background, but yet I haven't heard anything in the last 2 months now since I got that letter either.
Can you work while they look into it?
I am working while they're looking into it, yes. My boss is very adamant on allowing that, but I'm just kind of curious, I guess, is wondering if if I'm gonna end up getting one of them letters. If so, I'd like to get a head start on that.
Yep. And so, I mean, if you wanna, I'm gone till next Thursday. Yeah, I mean, I don't want you to talk about your stuff on a public line with other people on the phone, but like, I would encourage you to look up the statute, figure out, I mean, you know what your crime is. I would encourage you to do the work, like figure out where your stuff is on here. And like, when it gets into, 7 and 10 years, it's less of a big deal. When it gets into 15 years, it's not as big of a deal. And so, and then, stay of adjudication usually depends on how long it is. Like, that's the stuff I'm talking about. Like, there's all these variables.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. And I'm planned on being here until 1:30. And so if we get done earlier, and if you want to call Lucia or whatever, I would be willing to talk to you about it. I just don't want to do it on the open phone.
Okay,
And-
yeah.
And like I said, I think Gina's email shared the PowerPoint, and I also can send that out to people as well if you don't have that. Any other questions for Gina in the moment? And again, always we can follow up. We were scheduled till 1:30 to allow for questions. I like to allow time for organizational updates from you guys, community events going on. But yeah, if people have other questions, they can chat them in or raise your hand or unmute.
So I'm just going to share a quick story and then I'll be done and we can do organizational updates or whatever. Yeah. And who was that I was just talking to?
I believe that was Cynthia. I believe, yeah.
So,
yep.
Can I write on this paper?
Yeah.
Do you want to just text her?
Mhm.
Put her in this number?
Yep.
She can call me. I don't want her to email me about it. It's just going to end up being a phone call.
Okay.
So if you want to send her that.
Sure.
So anyways, when I first got my job at Teen Challenge, I ended up losing my parental rights for my kids when I was using drugs. I left them at my parents' house and was gone for several months. And I did that because I was a horrible parent and a raging drug addict. And I never abused my kids or hurt them in any way. I just left them with my parents because that was what was best for them. And my mom worked with the county and they ended up terminating my parental rights. And I was in prison when they did that. And so they terminated my parental rights involuntarily because I wasn't there to sign the paperwork. And nobody told me at that time that involuntary termination of parental rights was a bigger deal than voluntary termination of parental rights. So I talked to my mom the day before the thing happened and I was like, whatever, it's fine. Just do what you need to do. And so at that time, when I got my job at Teen Challenge, right here, possession of pictorial representation of a minor, all that stuff. The next thing down here, right here on this permanent disqualification of parental rights, there was another statute right here that said involuntary termination of parental rights was another statute right here. So permanent disqualification from ever working with vulnerable adults and children was involuntary termination of parental rights, which isn't a criminal thing. It's a civil thing. And so I got my job at Teen Challenge. I was there for 4 months working and they got the letter back and it said that I had to be physically removed from the building because I was a permanent. And so I, for a year, went down to the legislature and worked with my local legislature and just went down there and said, wait, like, why, what do you mean? And so I worked with my local legislature and went down there and got the law changed. And they moved involuntary. They actually deemed it unconstitutional to differentiate between involuntary termination of parental rights and voluntary termination of parental rights. And I think now, I haven't looked for a long time, but I think now, here, it's right here now. So I got it moved. I did that by myself.
That's awesome.
So, and so I got the law changed. So termination, and it just says termination of parental rights. And so that's why I got it so involved in the legislature and this specific piece of legislation and DHS set-asides and stuff, because I think sometimes guys in suits and women in suits make these laws based on some crazy thing that happened, and that they don't really understand how it affects people like you and I, and people like you and I who are our worst selves on these days that we make these decisions based on the fact that we're using drugs and alcohol, and that they need to hear a story and see a face to be able to understand that that's not us. That's the drugs making those decisions, and that who better to serve the people that we serve than us. So
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Gina for being here. Thank you so much for this information. It was really helpful. Again, if you have follow-up questions, just let us know. I'm really glad we have this recorded and that we have this information now to share with people. I think it's confusing, and this was really helpful. Let's go into some updates if you have things you want to share. I try to do some peer job announcements as I see them posted throughout the community. I also have said before, I will only share those openings if they pay living equitable wages. The Indian Board of Health is hiring a peer, so I can send out that description to you if you'd like. It's full-time. They did not list their pay, so I don't have that information, unfortunately. So I don't love that. But Indian Board of Health is awesome, and so they are hiring for one peer currently. Wayside has our Wayside Women's Services Echo next Thursday on the 21st at noon. And we have Safe Harbor coming to present then. Safe Harbor is awesome and really important for our clients. It's a network of systems to provide sex trafficking assistance. And also Minnesota has some very specific Safe Harbor laws related to the age in which you can be charged and whatnot. So I'm really excited to have them come speak. They're a really important system, and they're important for our clients, the work we do. And then on December 6th, we have our Friday Forum, which is a 2-hour presentation, and you can do this in person or through Zoom. And it's going to be on the intersections between co-occurring substance abuse and sexual exploitation. And we have some victims and survivors coming from Breaking Free and Pride. Again, this is related to sex trafficking resources that are out there in Minnesota. You can sign on through Zoom or be in person for that. I'm happy to share that information with you. And now please step in if you want to chat or unmute, raise your hand. If you have updates for the community, we'd love to have them. And for other trainings that your organizations may be doing or events in the world, Tiffany, does MRC have anything coming up that you want to share about?
Nope, we don't. We have our new calendar out for January for the RCA, for the Recovery Coach Academy. So I can send that to you. Maybe you can send that out through email blast. I don't have it right on me, but I can get that to you.
Yep.
Other than that, we did just hire a new peer farm mobile SUDS. Her name is Ashley Hergit. She's not on today. She's in training at the RCA actually right now, but she will be joining us the next time that we have the PS Echo, so I'll be happy to introduce her to everybody. We are still looking for another peer for mobile SUDS. That position to be about 20 to 30 hours a week part-time, about $18 an hour. So I'll have a job posting for that as well, so I can send that to you, Lucia, as well, and you can send that out. Other than that, no, nothing else for MRC. So thank you.
Yeah, send out that calendar, Tiffany. I'd love to have that. I know some people had asked me about when the next RCA is, and if you send that out, I would love to. I'll share that with people as well.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else have updates they want to share? Okay. Well, thanks for everybody for signing on. Thank you again, Gina. We are not going to have a peer support echo on the 28th, so our next one will be in December on the 12th, and we won't have one on December 26th, so we're only going to have one between now and the new year. I'll send out all that information again like a week before. I'll be sending out the follow-up survey either today or within the next couple of days, so please fill that out. You can also indicate on that if you need a certificate for continuing education credits. And if you have peers or coworkers who you think would be interested in signing on, you can always share my information or forward along those links. Okay, thanks for signing on, everyone. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.